in the Box episodes of horror with Donna and Eric. I'm Donna,
And I'm Eric.
and today we are talking about another movie that shaped our love of horror. One of Eric's picks that coincides with our previous episode. The movie is The Pit and the Pendulum with Vincent Price.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite movies overall. So, but it's definitely one I watched at a very early age, and and kind of put me on my love for Vincent Price and also the I guess the path for Edgar Allan Poe and horror.
Yeah. So did you read The Pit and the Pendulum after watching this, or had you read it before, or do you not
I'm
remember?
I'm pretty sure. No, I know that I saw this before. I
Okay.
remember seeing this at a very, very young age, like six or something crazy like that.
Okay.
So I just remember seeing it on TV. It was on all the time, like on, when they would run those specials and stuff and Vincent
Hmm.
Price movies and stuff. Six, seven, eight, sometime around there. I don't remember the first time. Like I read Telltale Heart, like we talked about a lot. I mean, I reread that one a ton. I don't remember the first time I read The Pit and the Pendulum, but it is drastically different in a
Yeah.
way. In a way, it's different, and then at the same time, it's also it's basically the movie's two parts that they had to write, and then the third act is the Pit and the Pendulum story.
Yeah.
And Roger Corman, who's the director producer, and he's one of my favorites. I mean, he's done some of my favorite movies, and he is the grandfather of the B movie. I mean, everything that we like for schlocky horror from the 70s
Hmm.
and 80s, and even a lot of the stuff on sci-fi, he's the producer behind. But in the old days, he also directed. And this
Yeah.
is one of the for lack I mean I would call it a masterpiece because I love everything about it, but this is one of those movies that stands out that he did.
Yeah. This was my first time seeing it, that I can recall. I mean, maybe my mother had watched it and I like caught pieces of it, but this is the first time I actually sat and like watched the whole movie. And as you said, it's drastically different from the story, but it's still so much Poe.
Oh yeah.
Like the whole like atmosphere, the setting, um, just it was just still, even if they didn't have that ending part with the pit and the pendulum, I would still think this was a Poe story.
Yeah, the funny thing is so I've seen it so many times. At this time when I watched it with um the director's commentary. So Roger Corman talks about the movie, and he's that's the first thing he says is that if you were trying to make a movie with just a short story, you'd have a 15-minute movie.
Hmm.
And then he talks about how they decided to take the first two parts of the movie, and then they would. I've got a visitor, and she's about pulling all the wires right now, so I have a feeling everything's gonna crash too. Um, anyways, sorry. The He said that what they wanted to do is capture the vibe and the feeling of Poe so that they could get to the third act where they were going to focus on the actual stuff that was in the short story or that
Yeah.
inspired the short story. And so everything they did was to give you that feel, just like you said. So that's awesome. So you dive in and you're thinking the same thing that he was shooting for.
Yeah.
Um, so that tells us everything right there that they really were leaning into the idea of Poe.
Yeah.
Um, they had just done Follow the House of Usher, and they changed that story up a little bit too. Of course, they always do when they do these things. But he did that movie first, and then he was going to do Mask of the Red Death, but he didn't. Another movie came out that was similar, and he didn't want to have them so close together.
Right.
And so he did The Pit and the Pendulum, and they used a lot of the same stuff. That's the cool thing about Roger Corman. Roger Corman is all about saving money and doing everything for profit, right? So they took all the stuff that they had from Fall of the House of Usher and they just kind of built on top of it. And then that allowed them to make everything seem grander and more like a castle when they do Pit and the Pendulum.
Yeah. So it's funny you say that because as I'm watching it, the scenes where the brother Bernard is first coming into the castle, I swear that like hall was and I know it's different movie people, but I swear it was the same set as Dracula. It looked in my mind,
Yeah.
and it's been a while since we watched that, so that was last year sometime. But to me, I'm just like, I've seen this set before, you know?
Yeah, it definitely might. Well, some of the aspect could be, and he could have, whoever they used as the stage director was probably going to steal from that too. I mean, it's
Yeah,
a classic um, opening to a movie, or at least to that scene of that section, introduction of a character,
yeah.
and so you get that same feel, the same vibe. I mean, it's very straightforward horror.
Oh
It's
yeah,
got a lot of the early. I mean, of course, and then it happened years ago, so it kind of set the way for everybody to copy it. And I think Hammer copies a lot of what he did, what Corman did with AIP, his production company. So, I think they influenced how Hammer approached their early stuff. So, but yeah,
yeah,
Corman's if you ever get a chance to deep dive Corman, there's just a couple of documentaries and some books and stuff, but the documentaries are really good, where he just talks about how he started in the movie business and then how he starts to make movies and then how he goes from being the director, producer to just producing it. And then he gives opportunities to all of these super famous directors. They're almost all of them in the 80s and 90s. Their first stuff is with a Roger Corman production. And so it's a fun deep dive if you have time to get into the indie nature of filmmaking. And
yeah,
they lean into horror so much because they are cheaper to make,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I like this movie because it was really kind of a mashup of a lot of different subgenres. Like you had grief horror,
Hmm.
you had a little bit of supernaturalness going on, even though it turned out to not really be supernatural-ish.
Yeah.
Mental health horror because the guy had like a nervous breakdown, then like switched personalities. Nicholas, the main character. Um, so you really had a whole lot of stuff going on in this
Yeah.
one movie.
So gothic horror
Yeah.
and then you have, torture
Torture,
without it
yeah.
getting it doesn't get graphic. It's not like Hostel or anything, but it's definitely there.
Mm,
And yeah, no, he does a really good job. And I think part of the reason the movies are so good is at the time he's got Richard Matheson writing the screenplay with him, and I mean that's a huge name in horror too.
yeah,
And so to have both Corman, I mean, you basically this is a triangle of amazingness. Matheson, Corman, and Vincent Price. I don't see how you could go wrong.
yep, definitely not. I love this poster too.
Yeah, those old school posters. I mean, he
Yeah,
knew how um, to showcase his films to get them sold and into theaters.
yeah,
And so, yeah, and then what's amazing is, um, I don't know everything. I don't know. This is what I think of when I think of classic stuff. It's not the Universal. I think of Vincent Price.
yeah,
Although I understand that Universal is, I mean, without them, we don't have the Vincent Price stuff. But
right.
in my mind, the stuff that made me love it is this. And so, I go back and watch Universal and I enjoyed it, as we discussed it and stuff. And you can definitely see how it laid the groundwork.
Yeah,
But the vibe that you get off of these pictures, and then I think it's also why I like the Hammer stuff as much as I do. It's because it kind of feeds off of these kind of movies.
hmm.
But this one imprinted on me at a very early age.
I can see why. I mean, even now I'm almost 50 and it, it was a really good movie. I'm sometimes leery about watching older movies, especially for the first time. Because I feel like, oh, they're not going to keep my
Hmm.
interest. I think I've mentioned something like this about black and white movies
Yeah.
when we watched a few black and whites, and this was just like from the music to the scenery and the atmosphere was just I was drawn right in. Even though
Eh,
I knew it was different from the story because you had said that before we had like when we were reading The Pit and the Pendulum, you had
uh-huh.
mentioned the movie's nothing like this. Um, So I knew it wasn't going to be like that. I had no expectations. I had really no idea what was going to happen. It was really good.
I think the cool thing is that they took the idea of the Spanish Inquisition and they push it a generation down
Hmm.
with the Son. And so we have the feel of the torture and the fanaticism, but there's no mention of the church at all. So it's almost as if it's not really the Inquisition. It's just that this guy's dad was a crazy person that tortured, innocent folks and stuff.
Yeah,
Um, but it gave us, I think, by doing that and opening up that way, it gives us a better idea for a story because you don't have all that heavy religious stuff going on that you would need to fill out a full hour and a
right.
half. So, and then Vincent, I mean, I watch this guy read a phone book. I mean, it makes me happy just to see him in anything. So,
Yeah.
the cool thing is that I've got this special collector's edition Blu-ray that came out years ago, 3 volumes. The first volume has Pit and the Pendulum. It has before the movies a a little PBS clip from a PBS station in Iowa that did a Vincent Price marathon, and they got him to come and
Ooh,
talk about each movie before they showed it. And so you get to watch the clip of him talking about it like, 30 years later. And he mentions a few things and explains a couple things and then talks about how cool the story, and then here's the movie kind of thing. So that's really fun. It's not in the movie. I don't think they have. I think, well, they did it on television. There's a prologue that you can get. Um, that's on the Blu-ray special. I don't know if you can. I mean, you might be able to find it on YouTube and learn it that way. But I watched that last night too, and it's a really cool thing. And they used it so that they could hit the time right with the commercials, so that the film would be the full 2 hour with the
oh, okay.
commercials or whatever. And so it doesn't really tie into the movie other than it's his sister because she was the only person available, and she's in a nut house. And then it's her trying to say, "Hey, I'm not crazy. Everything I told you is true." And then it rolls into the movie, and then you're supposed to have the idea that she's telling somebody this is what happened, and then you
Yeah.
would get the movie. So
Right.
that's never been released, I don't think, on any of the normal editions of the DVDs. I don't. It might have been a special feature in the old days, but it's never been tagged with it and then shown as the full picture, other than a couple times on TV. So those are the two things that jump out from this, that and listening to the director talk.
Yeah.
Um,
That's pretty cool.
the cool thing
Yes.
is also is having when Price plays not only his self as Nicholas, he also plays his father in the
His
flashbacks.
father,
But he
Sebastian.
plays
Yeah.
his father so differently that you can actually tell they're two different people
Yeah. And
just by mannerisms and facial expression and the
yeah,
way
and
he
when
has.
he turns into Sebastian,
Yeah,
um, and then of course Elizabeth is his wife. Um, I was a little annoyed by the Nicholas character with how woe is me he was. Like, I get it. The dude loved his wife and she's dead. I get it. He's going to be down in the dumps, but I don't know. It just came off a little bit too much for me. Not that I hated the movie because of it, but I
yeah.
don't know. It was kind of just
Well,
like,
think of
eh,
how weird this was. This was a movie, what, shot in the 50s. And even the director, he even mentions it. He goes, "Well, it's really not normal for a leading character to show this much emotion."
yeah,
He goes, "So it really stood out. The performance stands out because he leans into that emotion." But I think he's doing that because they're trying to set up that he is mentally unstable. He's
yeah,
so mentally unstable, he can't control his emotions about his dead wife. And
yeah,
then that allows us to see how he could be manipulated into becoming his father later in the thing. If he would have been stiff upper lip and very stoic about everything, then it doesn't make sense that he goes crazy.
yeah,
But because
true.
he's simpering and because he's so wishy-washy and because he has that much guilt because he actually thinks that he buried her alive, um, then it allows us to see that, okay, well, maybe, especially if you're using 50s thought process, he's so mentally unstable that he could be driven insane. I think
Yeah,
that's nowadays we would say, well, no, it's healthy for him to be emotional. He's got to work it out and he's got to go talk to somebody and all that. Well, they're not
yeah,
doing that in the 50s. So
yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, yeah, but also it shows us the range of price.
Yeah.
I mean, he puts in this amazing performance.
Yeah, and
Um,
he did switch back and forth between that a lot because when he first met Barnard, he was kind of like stern and what are you doing? Who are you?
yeah,
But then he flowed into that wishy-washy, woe is me, and then he was right back to being this, formidable person.
and apologizing,
Yeah,
and then he was like, he was kind of trying to do stiff upper lip. They go in the bedroom, and then he sees the painting of his wife that he painted, and they talk about some of the memories, and then it hits him again, and he gets sad about her death. But the whole time, the other guy, he's talking, her brother, who comes to find out what happened to her months after her death.
Francis.
Um, he the dog is just running into things right now. Just hit something into the microphone. It's just mass chaos here. So I don't even know what I was thinking about. So he said, "Oh, about the brother." He's talking to the brother, and yeah, now I totally lost train of thought. Now we can go to the next thing. I don't know what we were talking about. So
So the brother Francis comes to figure out what's going on, what happened to his sister, and he's very like accus
yeah, he thinks that the guy
accusatory.
did something.
Yeah, he's totally like in his mind, even though he doesn't say anything, just his attitude and his
Yeah,
bearing, he's like you're thinking right away he's thinking that he, Nicholas killed Elizabeth.
right. Got rid of her
Um,
for whatever reason, but
yeah,
we're led to believe I don't think they ever talk about dowries or anything like that nature, like money or
no,
anything. So it's not like he would have married her for her money and then killed her. It felt like he was the one that had the money and all the power.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so yeah, but no, he's very. I mean, it's like an older brother coming to see what did you do to my sister, kind of thing.
yeah.
And so it makes sense why he is so aggressive because he's going to basically enemy territory. He doesn't understand what happened, and he doesn't expect them to tell him the truth.
He
And
doesn't seem
actually,
like he knows these people at all.
oh yeah, it doesn't seem like it feels like there was no grand wedding. It was just the two of them getting married.
Yeah,
However, this isn't like
asking the father's permission to
right.
marry the
And then have
daughter,
like
and
this isn't like a merging of empires or something like that. This is,
yeah,
he might be a nobleman, but he's not. It doesn't feel like this is both sides of a
yeah,
of a power play or whatever. But no, it's a very interesting idea of having this guy. He shows up, castle's on the, kind of isolated, and it does feel like the Vincent Price character just is in the middle of nowhere, and that the only thing that he cared about was the wife.
yeah. And then his sister had come to stay with him.
Nicholas'
Nicholas's
sister to
sister.
take care of him,
Yeah, and
and then the doctor
and then the
who
doctor.
who does say that she's dead, and later we are told that it's Vincent Price's character's best friend.
Yeah,
So I mean, I figure, and really, these are the main characters here. These five people. Even though if you really go and look at it, the lady that plays the wife, she's got a high bill on the thing, but she's barely in the movie.
yeah,
And the reason she
yeah,
got such a high bill is that she's a very famous actress that was in a bunch of Italian films.
yeah.
And
Barbara
so he,
Steele, I think
yeah,
her
so
name
he
was.
put
Yeah,
Barbara Steele's name really high because he thought it would sell movies
yeah,
overseas. So, which is smart, I mean, that's what this guy's all about, was making a dollar.
yeah. Um,
You got to appreciate the hustle.
yeah, you definitely do.
And so, the whole beginning of this movie is just these five characters coming together. Well, four characters because the wife's dead, and discussing what happened. And we later find out that from the doctor that Vincent Price feels like she might have been buried prematurely, and then therefore she would have died, basically suffocated or, just died because they're walled up. They don't bury people in this
Yeah,
family. They put them in crypts. So
yeah.
they're
And they
behind a
said the cause of death, which they kept like first it was something in her blood, and then
yeah.
they told the story that she died of fright because of the house. She
Yeah.
got into the torture chambers where his Sebastian had done his dirty deeds down there and um, just got frightened to death.
Yeah, and then and it was like she became fascinated with it, and so she's
Mhm.
got this weird obsession
Obsessed. Yeah.
with the torture stuff, and so it's slowly driving her insane, where she can't sleep, can't eat, and is becoming withdrawn from him. And so the more he tries to help, the more she's driven to the torture stuff, which, I don't even know why she would have found it. That's
Yeah.
not, he doesn't seem to be the kind of person that the first thing he does is show off his dad's torture chamber.
Right. Yeah.
But still, I get it. Oh, well, the best friend would have known. And later
Yeah.
we find out it's different.
Yeah.
So
Um, so yeah, and then we have I don't know what to call him, I don't want to call him the butler because I don't think he was the butler, but
he was like the
Maximilian.
man of the house, like
Yeah.
well, I guess, Butler fits. He was
Butler
the
does
guy
fit.
that
Yeah.
did everything, he buttled.
He did.
And she
Um,
was the housekeeper.
the housekeeper. Yep.
And so, but they were the other two actors, really. I mean, the other
Yep.
ones that I didn't include were the flashback, the wife, and the uncle.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it was a very small cast, um, which was great
Yeah.
because it kept the story nice and tight, I think.
And they were able to use these actors in a fun way.
Yeah.
A lot of times you'd see them in the background, down a hallway or something, just in the background, just moving
Yeah.
across, setting up something here, making you think about something that might happen there, coinciding a lot with the paranormal stuff.
Hmm.
So then you'd think, oh, it's paranormal, but then all of a sudden there's a human there. So then you're like, oh, maybe it's not paranormal. And then you got to think of, well, are these people maybe in on it? Or
Right.
are they the cause of everything? And so there's a little mystery there, which is cool.
Yep.
And
Yeah, Maria, because I remember Maria was cleaning Elizabeth's room and then she comes out, she screams or whatever. And she's like, I heard her. She was talking to me. And then, of course, Nicholas goes over the edge and he like slams the bedroom door and locks it. And
nobody shall ever come in here.
yep,
And then almost immediately, well, hours later, I guess, somebody's in there destroying it. And so
yeah,
then, and at that point, they'd already established that there's no way into that room except through that door or the windows. So when they are able to get the key back, they open the door, they run in, all the windows are locked. So then they can't figure out what's going on, but everything's been destroyed.
yeah,
And then Nicholas goes even more crazy. And I think that's the point that sends him down to the crypt, right?
yeah.
Because
Because
they want to see, he wants to prove to the brother that she died and has been buried.
yeah. But when they get to the crypt and they open it up, they see this. And at first I was like, okay. But then I kind of was like, all right, I get it. Her mouth is open, her eyes are open. Looks like she's screaming, her hands are moving. She was trying to get out of the coffin.
Yeah, I think
Or,
something they should have done that I thought would have been cool was show us the inside of the coffin top.
yeah,
The crypt top when they finally lifted it, the stone. If you would have had gouge marks that we could see on camera,
yeah,
that really would have sold what was going on. I mean, we know what's going on. We could figure it out. We're smart, but
yeah,
it would have been a cool, quick flip. Now, when they film this movie, because everything Corman does is very fast paced, because that's part of the bottom line for dollars. They filmed this in 15 days. The first day was the exterior by the beach shot, so that's only a couple actors, and then the other 14 days were the rest of the people. But this whole movie filmed in 14 days
wow,
on location. Now, everything, like I said before, they built off the set of the Usher, and then they were able to bring other things in that they needed set piece wise. If they could rent it, they would do that. But normally they'd build it or whatever's cheaper.
yeah,
And so then the rest of the 14 days was spent on stage where they would do and so a lot of the scenes, which is another cool thing about the movie, it feels gigantic and it feels like it's all over the place and you're in all these different places within the castle, but it's like four rooms that
yeah,
they just change the angle or they do some tricks to make you feel like it's longer. And it's a very cool how to make a movie on a budget if you
yeah,
start really paying attention to the stuff behind the scenes, or you're watching and seeing how they were able to pull off some of their movie magic stuff.
yeah. Yeah, I think for a movie, when did this come out? The 60s,
I want
61?
to, yeah,
61. I think this mummified, dried out corpse was shocking enough for 61,
yeah,
because it threw me a little bit when I saw it, you
and
know?
this is on the border of black and white versus color,
Yeah.
So, that might have been shocking too to see it in full color and all that. I mean, that's part of the reason I know that Frankenstein, when it moved to Hammer, was so um, considered so graphic was because the color and you
Yeah.
could see the blood and all this stuff. So, but yeah, I think it would have the same effect. It definitely has an effect on Vincent Price because then
Oh
he
yeah.
kind of goes loopy.
Yeah. Yeah. He goes insane. And this is when um so they go back upstairs and they're all like the doctor was like, I swear she was dead when, I swear I pronounced her dead. But then he kind of just like blew it off. I mean, we find out later why, but
Yeah.
I kind of was just like at that point I'm like, why are you being so nonchalant about the fact that your best friend pronounced your wife dead? She wasn't dead, so she got buried alive. And I guess a mental break. I would have expected some kind of like aggression towards the doctor. You killed my
Yeah.
wife,
Yeah, but I mean, he apologized about it to the guy, and and Vincent Price's character kind of accepted it,
Yeah,
accidents happen almost. But and I think the other way is that he takes the blame on himself. I don't think he would ever blame
yeah,
his friend for the accident, even though the doctor's the reason she
yeah,
got buried. But
yeah. The
and
doctor was like, I'm sorry. Oh, and I gotta leave tomorrow. Like,
yeah, well, the brother's leaving the next day too,
yeah,
right? So everybody's
yeah,
leaving, and then I think what he's trying to do is flush the house,
yeah,
which is we find out later. But if he can just get the brother and the sister out of the house.
yeah.
But the sister's the one that I don't think made a commitment to leave yet.
No,
Although,
no.
you know what? And I hate to say it, but we're talking early 60s. We're also talking a movie set in the, 1600s,
Yeah,
maybe 1700s.
yeah,
Um, they're probably not thinking much of the sister being in the way of anything.
yeah.
Whatever happens will happen.
Hmm.
And then the prologue I discussed earlier makes sense. They send the sister to the crazy house and say she's insane, and then they don't have to worry about her because you could just put women in, say they're hysterical and put them in sanitariums or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
So
but
yeah,
we've gone through it, but we haven't discussed it. We need to jump back real quick because they do a flashback in this, and it shows Vincent's character as a child playing in the dungeon, which I thought was a little weird.
yeah,
And then he is hiding when his dad comes down with his brother and his wife, accuses them of having an affair, and then tortures them to death in front of Nicholas's,
yeah.
Vincent Price's character,
But then we find out the mother wasn't actually tortured to death. She was tortured and then put in the wall. She was buried,
walled up,
basically walled up alive.
which was an ongoing theme in Poe's
Yeah,
stories. In fact, he has more than one that has that happen. So you get a little call back to that, and it makes it even more Poe though. So like you said, it felt like a Poe movie, even if you could take out the ending. So yeah, that's another reason I think it does feel like Poe because it has that person stuck behind the wall as they build it up and
yeah,
brick them in.
yeah.
This
So
was
as
amazing
he's
scene with Vincent though when he's starting to lose his mind, but that's a little farther too. We still have more to talk about because the Vincent's been given drugs and put to bed.
yeah, this is very creepy face. Um, I kind of was weirded out by him as he's like going downstairs because he's blank, but he's not really blank, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean he does a tremendous job of
Yeah,
because I mean he starts to hear his wife's voice and then he follows her. Now they've already accused him of making everything up in his head and doing everything that the supernatural had been blamed for. So he's like, well, maybe it is me doing it. So he's on the brink of crazy. He's already starting to
yeah,
accept that maybe he is unable to accept her death to the point where he's making stuff up. So then she starts to talk to him, and they discovered that there's passageways through the walls. The brother finds that out, and so that's where they come to him and blame him for all the other stuff.
yeah.
And so as she's calling him, and that's the thing that sticks in my head all the time. The Nicholas, her saying Nicholas, and then pulling him out
Nicholas.
of his room down to the dungeon where they have all the torture stuff.
Yeah.
And then she comes out of, and he sees flashes of her like a spirit. You only see her in the shadows. And then when he finally does see her face to face, um, he goes completely insane and basically is it. For a second, you almost feel like they think he's dead the way they
Yeah.
talk about him, but it's more like his brain shut off and he's just
Yeah.
laying there.
Yeah. I was the whole time he was going down there, and then he comes face to face with her because she crawls out of the coffin, the crypt, whatever. Um, and he like then turns around and tries to run. And I'm like, what did you expect?
Yeah, I know, right? He was called down there and she comes out of nowhere and blindsides him and then he's just but I mean it all kind of ties into it though. I mean how far gone he is.
Yeah.
And then the doctor appears. Now at this point, everybody in the house knows Nicholas is gone. Nobody has heard, I don't think, her talking,
No.
but they are all looking for Nicholas. And so the doctor smartly sends everybody up and he says, I will go check the dungeon area. Because he knows that his lover, the wife, the dead lady, is down there torturing the husband.
Yeah.
So obviously the whole thing is a setup, a plan to get his castle and money and all that stuff.
Yeah. But really, is that what it was about? Because he may have a castle, but he didn't seem to be like overly wealthy.
Yeah, I would everything, and I don't know if we're supposed to believe that everything's kind of in this realm of disrepair because of the death of his wife.
Mm, yeah,
Like,
because
was
she had
every
died 3 months before, so
yeah.
I guess yeah. Um,
Although 3 months, man,
yeah,
seems like a long time to start set up the crazy train. They could have done this in like 3 weeks.
yeah,
He'd have been as emotional as he was 3 months. He must have been a wreck the first couple of weeks.
yeah,
Um, but that's just a small loophole. We can
yeah,
glaze over that and just let it be. But yeah, no,
yeah.
that's it does feel real. Now maybe they were waiting for the brother. Although I don't know if they wouldn't have been able to pull this off weeks into it, then they wouldn't have had to worry about the sister or the
Or the
brother. Because
brother.
when they showed up, they'd just be like, "Oh, he died," and then it would just be then it would be a flip, right? It would be the sister
Yeah,
showing up, accusing the lady of what'd you do to my brother, and then the other brother being there to kind of protect his sister. But um, unless maybe the sister showing up threw a curveball into it.
yeah,
But this is a case
maybe.
where we're probably reading too much into it, and we're probably
Yeah,
supposed to just let it go.
yeah.
Um, but what's funny is the doctor's when he comes down, he's like, I told you wait one more day. And she's like, I couldn't wait one more day. You waited 3 months. You couldn't wait one
One
more
more
day.
day. Yeah, yeah,
And so they tell their whole plan to the guy, to Vincent Price's character, who's you're supposed to think is brain dead, just
yeah.
staring off into space.
Catatonic or something. And she starts taunting him. Oh, your mother was an adulterer, and your wife was an adulterer. Um,
Your
then
uncle
your
and then your best
uncle, your
friend.
best
Yeah.
friend. Yeah,
Really
and then
rubbing it in his face.
yeah, pretty much. Like you said, I don't know if they thought he was dead, because he had a pretty bad fall. Um,
Well, the doctor said he's gone.
yeah,
And I was like, but I don't think he's dead, but maybe he's gone as in he's just out, but he's staring at her as she's talking, and then he
yeah,
smiles, and it's a creepy moment too when he
yeah.
smiles and it says yes or whatever, and
And then the
then
laugh
yeah, and then he
that he
kind of
starts.
gets up
Yeah,
and then he starts calling everybody by the wrong names. He starts
yeah.
calling them by the names of the people that betrayed his father.
The brother, and so it starts calling him by the names of Sebastian's brother and Sebastian's wife,
Yeah,
Nicholas's uncle and mother. Um, and then he declares himself as Sebastian.
yeah, and so we know now that he's Looney Tunes, and he's
Yeah,
going to revert to whatever his father would do at a time like this, which is take the people to the torture dungeon and take care of them. Now,
yeah,
we were given us a brief glimpse into the pit and the pendulum portion at the very beginning because you can hear the pendulum being run,
yeah,
but you don't know what it is. And when he
yeah,
comes out of the room, when he meets the brother for the first time, he says the machine always has to be the upkeep on the machine or whatever. is
Yeah.
always a problem. So we know that there's something in that room that's dangerous. We just don't know what yet. And so
Which we have.
he takes so
The
he
bro the doctor ends up in the pit.
yeah, the doctor,
He kills the wife first,
trying to think, he
supposedly.
throws the wife into the Iron Maiden,
Yes.
closes it up, and then he fights with the doctor, and the doctor runs away, and he starts chasing him. Doctor runs into the pit in the pendulum room, but he doesn't know there's a pit and a pendulum, so he falls into the pit and
Yeah.
disappears. So that when Sebastian, Vincent Price's character, shows up, he goes, "Where are you? Where are you?" And that is when his the wife, the
The brother-in-law.
yeah, calls out, where are you guys at? Or, calls out for Vincent Price. And he, in his madness, assumes it's the same guy. So, oh, there you are. Now,
Yeah.
I thought, well, they're both about the same height and they both have the same haircut. It's easy to see how somebody in Looney Tunes would pick him out as the same
Yeah,
guy.
I was just gonna say he's completely gone at this point. Like he's even wears his father's torture clothes.
Yeah, he slips that on. And
Yeah.
so he goes and gets the brother-in-law, hits him with a fire poker, drags him into the room and ties him to the device. And so
And then
this is
he
when this is when a picture I couldn't find that I wanted to share. I thought would have been cool. There's this when they come into this room, they do flash cuts to the walls where there's this paintings, and it's of the people watching, and that
oh
represents the
right.
people that in the
In the
story were
story.
watching
Yeah.
the sinners being punished on the pendulum. And I thought, oh, that's a cool thing. And for some reason, it's not included in any of the places I went to look for pictures for the movie. I should have taken a picture of it when I was watching it last night, but I didn't think about it till today. So
Yeah.
what's cool is the setup of the pendulum. It's really fancy, very cool, and looks to be a functional torture device that they've got
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah, and I like it's how it's different because it's kind of like a so you have the pit. So in the story, you have the room and there's like this hole.
Mhm.
But in this, the hole is the room, the pit is the room, and there's like this little like
Like a cross bridge or something.
yeah, that kind of sticks out, and that's where he has
Yeah. Yeah, because he like
Bernard.
reaches down, pulls it up, and hooks it
Yeah,
onto the thing, and then later, and then I think he drops it when he has the guy on there,
yeah.
um, so that when you're on the pedestal, you're on the pedestal. There's nowhere else to go.
Pedestal, that's the word I was looking for. Um, so yeah, it was kind of like a reverse. The room was the pit, and then you have like the
Yeah, it was a
area.
really cool setup. And the other thing that's really cool about it is if you watch it on a wide shot, only a little bit of that is the set, and the rest of it's a matte painting. And it's just this really beautiful matte painting that really looks for the time. It holds up really well. This movie
Yeah,
holds up really well.
yeah,
Special effects that they do have, the costumes, the acting, the music, all of
yep.
it really sits well.
Yeah, what I thought was cool too about the pendulum is the fact that it was man powered. Because if you watched, because in the story, you just get this like, oh, somebody just pushed a lever. You kind of just imagine somebody just pushed a lever and this thing
Uh-huh.
started going. But in the movie, like Sebastian, Nicholas, whatever you want to call him, was actually using chains to make the pendulum have momentum and lower down.
Yeah.
Or no,
So like
the
he
the
really could. Oh, it was like see, he hit that lever to make it go down, I think, and the
yeah,
chains were making the spin and stuff. But
yeah,
it gave him the control of how quickly he wanted you to be terrified. How
yeah,
much of the torture was all in his hands.
yeah,
Um, which he did a very good job of that too. What's funny is that they had two versions the director was talking about. They have the metal one that was like heavy duty, and that they used for shots when they didn't have somebody on the pedestal, and then they had a rubber one so that if it hit them, it wouldn't do anything.
yeah.
But
It
the guy
wouldn't
was like
kill him.
real worried about it. Yeah, the actor was real worried. So during the some of the setup shots, the director laid on the thing and had him do the thing around him so that he could prove to the actor that he wouldn't get hurt, which I thought was pretty funny. And that
Yeah,
is low budget guerrilla filmmaking right there. When you're like,
yeah.
I'm going to strap you to this. And the guy's like, I don't think this is a good idea. And he's like, oh, let me show you kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I thought that was really cool. I thought
Hold
that
my
was a
beer.
fun
Let's
aspect to it.
um yeah, and then the sister Catherine ends up coming down and realizing what's going on. So then she goes and gets
Yeah.
Maximilian. Um and they bust through the door and you can see it, it's like already slicing his shirt. Um and then Maximilian wrestles with Vincent Price, Nicholas slash Sebastian, while the sister tries to push the lever to stop the pendulum. And Maximilian actually ends up becoming the hero.
Yeah, it's really funny because he's like, and then you also would wonder, would he really go against, well, in the master's wishes? But at this point, the master doesn't even recognize him. So they just immediately fight.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, no, he's honestly, without him, the brother's dead. This guy's continually crazy. I'm sure. I mean, I wonder what he would have thought of the sister
yeah. She probably would have been like next.
next, so it's probably a good thing. But yeah, no, and so Vincent falls into the pit, which is what this picture is of the
Yeah,
doctor and Vincent,
Vincent.
and they
Yeah,
die in the pit, and then um, they help the brother, and they go to leave the dungeon area, and then the next picture I think is the thing that sticks with me all the time, and it's my favorite
yeah.
ending to a
So
movie.
Catherine says, "No one will ever enter this room again," and that's
Yeah,
when you see
Sydney gets
Elizabeth's
there.
eyes in the Iron Maiden, and she's like, "Oh no!"
Yeah, I
That,
mean, and she's gagged, so she can't
yeah,
call out, which is
yeah,
why you would, you're like, oh, why isn't she making noise or screaming? But yeah, they're not paying attention.
yeah.
So,
And you know what? She she wanted to be dead. It'll take a while,
did
you
I not
know.
send that picture to you?
No,
I didn't. Okay, I made a card for it too. I'll post it on after when I'm making the video for the thing. I'll post it up
yeah,
in the middle there because it's such an iconic shot. Her eyes.
yeah,
I mean, you can see the fear. She
yeah,
she does a really good job of conveying the situation to the audience, and then we get the credits right then. So it's
yeah.
a perfect ending to a movie.
It was like the perfect ending to this movie because you're like horrified, but then you're like, you're getting what you deserve.
Yeah, she definitely gets what she deserves. And this time she will die like she
Yep.
would have if she would have been put behind the wall and put in that, heavy it's
Yeah.
not a coffin. I'm trying to think of what they call them, but you know, the crypt.
Yeah.
So,
And Catherine owns the house now because
yeah.
according to everybody, Elizabeth died 3 months ago. The brother is dead in the pit. Um, and so she owns the house. So I mean, she
So then
definitely doesn't want anybody going in there anymore. So she's probably going to have it like the doors like bricked up
yeah.
so nobody can go in there. So there's
Yeah,
no
it's
chance
it's
for
worth
Elizabeth.
it's worth getting rid of the value of that extra real estate, but
Yeah, exactly. You
for
can
her
just give
peace
up
of
that extra
mind.
square footage.
So, but yeah, she's and what's funny is that at a point the brother tells her, I wish we would have met under different circumstances. This is
Yeah,
terrible or whatever. So you could easily see a sequel of this being made with those two.
yeah,
And then you could, make it supernatural and have the haunting of her real spirit, because,
mm,
or his spirit, because he went Vincent Price, going crazy and stuff. So
yeah,
it's one of those movies that holds up, in my opinion. I watch it at least once a year. I love that movie. And,
yeah,
it makes
yeah.
me want to write stuff like that. So
Yeah, it was a super good movie. Super good movie. Really glad we watched it. Even though it was completely different than the actual story,
yeah.
I didn't find that made a big difference in my
Yeah, because I mean, in
enjoyment.
the end, it did have a pit and a pendulum, as I
It
put on
did.
the card. So,
It did. It had a pit and a pendulum.
yeah, no, it's really cool. And then you look at it, but when you start looking at behind the scenes, you can kind of see why it was such a good movie with all the influential horror minds,
Yeah,
that kind of put in their 2 cents. So, but yeah, no, it's one that imprinted very early on me. It's always the first one I think of when I think of Vincent Price. I'm sure there's, I think I'm sitting here rolling in my head all the different movies. Um, I will always probably argue that that's, if not number one, it's, top two, top three. So, um, and that's
Yeah,
tough for me because that one's like layman. Price is like layman to me, where I may acknowledge that some of them are lesser, but I love all of them, and I'm not going to, crap on them unless it's the lake. So
unless it's the lake.
that's the
It's
only.
funny. I was gonna say, I was just thinking in my mind I should say something about that, about the
Yep.
lake.
That. So other than that,
Now, could
because
you
that.
imagine Vincent Price starring in a movie adaptation of The Lake?
Yeah. Nah, I mean, once if we ever read it, you'll see. I mean, I could. It's like a lifetime. Like it's like a lifetime movie. It's Hallmark, but
Uh,
they try and make them a little more hard, edgier. The lake makes me think of that.
wow.
So it's not good.
Yeah.
But Pit and the Pendulum is great. And
Pit in a Pendulum,
after
yeah.
reading the story, I mean, that's cool because we just read the story, right? And I guess I never think about the Watchers when in the past, but this time I did. As soon as I saw the paintings, and I'm going to do that, like I'm going to do with her eyes. I'm going to go back and find a picture, and I'll throw it on the episode so people know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Um, as soon as I saw him, I go, "Oh, that's cool. That's a subtle nod to the story
Yep.
that kind of ties it all together without it actually being the story itself." So, and in the end, instead of what was it, the British saving them or the French showing up and saving the Spanish Inquisition person that was about to get cut up, it was Maximilian.
Yep.
So it kind of lines up. And they were right. You couldn't have got a full movie off of that. And if we decide to watch the one that came out in the 80s, you'll see that there's a ton of backstory with the Spanish Inquisition and stuff. And the Pit and the Pendulum part's very small. So
Yeah.
um with Lance Hendrickson.
Oh,
So
okay.
and I mean it's worth watching. It's one of those ones that I don't think gets enough love. But this one, this is I mean the whole point of this series is that these are movies that influenced us or maybe put
Yeah.
us on our path or whatever. This for sure is one of those movies. This is a movie that I've loved and adored forever. So
Yeah. Yeah. I can't recall off the top of my head like what and how many Vincent Price movies I have watched in the past. I'm sure there have been some, but I think I'm gonna need to start revisiting some,
oh yeah, we want to make that a series. I'm all on
yeah,
that.
some
So
Vincent Price movies because I
yeah.
really enjoyed this one, and I have a feeling I'd enjoy the others as well.
What's fun is watching some of these early movies, when he's kind of establishing himself as this horror icon, and then to visit him in some of the later movies where they're either poking fun of it or where they're like trying to give him something a little more to chew on, or they're trying to flip it on its head to try and, up the ante when it started getting a little more grotesque or a little more obscene, as we got further on. As you go through there comes a time when people start thinking that this is lame horror, and and that's when we start getting movies like Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, stuff like that. In the '70s, you start getting that
Yeah.
grindhouse kind of stuff, where basically it's kind of almost kind of mirrors indie horror and stuff. Like if we look at the way that you have your traditional horror, and then if you want to get into the weeds a little bit and go into indie horror, and then you start getting to get some of these stories that are a little more in your face, a little more hardcore. It kind of the movie in the '60s and '70s, it kind of mirrors that. And there comes a
Yeah.
point when Vincent Price is the punchline, which I never ever think that, but I can see, and I've read things that you can see why people are trying to make it that they're trying to discredit the old school to make themselves seem or look cooler as they come out with this new stuff, which is
Yeah.
a little grittier and stuff. So, I mean, if we got into all that, but yeah, no, it's fun to do that, to go and see, because then you can kind of some of these movies, you can tell he got a paycheck, he owed a movie or whatever, and he's walking through this movie, and it's still really cool because it's Vincent Price, and he does everything with flair, but you could tell the movies that he's really invested in and the characters he really likes, and the ones that he's, you know, I owe some money to the IRS and I had to do a movie kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So,
signed a contract for 3 movies, so
and back then they would do, they you don't hear that much about people in, pre 80s that backed out of these deals. If they had a contract, they did it, and then they would get out of the contract. But they, even if it was the worst movie ever, they'd still do it. Nowadays it feels like everybody they just back out of stuff left and right. So,
Or maybe they're smart enough to not sign multi-movie
oh
deals
yeah,
unless
and of
it's,
course we're talking about the old school system of how movies were
yeah,
made, and they would sign the stars to these contracts where like, hey, you work for MGM for 10 years, or hey, you are the property of Paramount now. And so, yeah, of course, that's a terrible way of doing it. And now they do it one movie at a time. But there are a lot of times where people back out of movies
yeah,
because they don't like something, the direction or whatever. Back then, you didn't have it. Didn't seem like you had that. You were kind of stuck. So, but that's also why you would do more movies because you were trying to burn through your contract.
yeah.
It's I mean, that's a fun thing. You go back and look. It's just like with sports and stuff. You go back and look at stuff in the old days, and you're like, man, how did they ever convince anybody that this was the way to do it? But
Yeah.
but it's how it was. And then
Hmm.
somebody would come fight it, and then you get better. So
Probably
hopefully
why they
everybody
have
can just
the Screen Actors Guild now. I
yeah,
shouldn't say
probably.
now like it just came up, but I'm sure it wasn't always around.
Yeah, I'm sure that there was. Although we might find out that it was invented to somehow manipulate the control of the actors, because now everything is so conspiratorial and dark and dirty
Yeah.
that you're like, okay, none of this was actually for the betterment of anybody but the guys that were making all the money. So,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, I mean, it could be. So, and that would be fun too. I mean, oh boy, if you wanted to do a Vincent Price thing, we could do that too. We could add that to the list. I'm a big fan. So,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I'm down with that. Absolutely. I will have to defer to your expertise on which movies we watch. So,
yeah, I can already think of a couple that we would need to watch just to get a good arc of everything. So,
nice. All right. Well, look forward to that in the future. So yeah, welcome. Thanks for joining this episode. I don't know why I'm not able to talk right now.
yeah, I know the whole episode's got this vibe of chaos as the dogs are ripping things down under the desk, and Don's telling them to be quiet, and my memory's shot, I guess, tonight. So
Yeah. Um,
run it back through. Let's start over and we'll do it again.
yeah, let's start all over again. Yeah, I hope you enjoy this episode. Check out The Pit and the Pendulum with Vincent Price if you haven't seen it. I do suggest reading The Pit and the Pendulum, not necessarily before or after. It doesn't matter, but I think it was great that I had read it and then saw the movie because I could appreciate the atmosphere that still made it a Poe story, even though it
And in a
wasn't.
way, I think it helped that you read three. If we hadn't
Yeah,
read three stories, so then we really got a vibe. And then we watched the show and you're like, oh, this vibes with what we've read, all of it.
yeah,
And so it really did have that feel to it. And I think that's a good thing about Corman. I mean, he did three, well, he did more than that, but there's three central Poe movies that Corman does. And then there's some of the other ones he does around it that are a little funnier, like The Raven. And then I think Tales Twice Told is a anthology picture, and it has a couple shorts that are Poe based, but they're a little funny too. But the ones that are serious, this is the second of that trilogy. So
nice. All right, well, check it out, and we will see you on the next episode.
take it easy.